How's it going, everybody? So, back again with probably the last carburetor video that I'm going to do for a good while, unless another question is raised about carburetors. So, what I'm going to do is kind of show what is going on inside a carburetor. So I'm going to break a couple of these down and we're going to go over essentially how a carburetor works. So we'll go over how it pulls fuel from the fuel tank, how it works its way through the carburetor, and gets to the engine. Alright, so first off, depending on one of the most important things for carburation is fuel. Obviously, you got to have fuel. So there are three things that are important for the combustion process to happen: air, fuel, and heat or spark, and compression, right? So I guess that would be four things: air, heat, fuel, and spark. Air, fuel, spark, and pressure. Alright, so if you have no compression, then the combustion process can't work. So, when you pull over a saw, as the piston descends and is forcing mix into the top of the cylinder, it's forcing air back out the impulse. Now, whether you're impulsing through an impulse line that's situated here on the top, or you're impulsing through the side of the carburetor, which a lot of old ones are impulsing through the side of the carburetor. Alright, so from that little bit of pressure that comes into this carburetor, opens this flap here. Let's see. Alright, so it opens this flap and fills this void. Now what this is for is this circle here is for equalization. You got to have an equalization or else it won't work, and that's what this hole is cut here for. If you ever get fuel out from that hole, then you need to start checking these ridges. See all these ridges? These ridges imprint into the gasket to keep all these channels separated, because that gasket moves up and down as that pressure is forced in here. That creates a vacuum on the fuel tank. Now, a fuel tank valve or vent allows air in, doesn't allow air out. So as it's pulling fuel out, it can pull air in to displace the fuel. That's why if you leave a saw out in the sun, all that pressure builds in the tank, and if you try to start it, you could flood it, because all that pressure built up in the tank can flood the carburetor. So it works its way through up here. Let's see. This is the impulse. The impulse works the whole diaphragm right here. So it pulls fuel in through this hole, opens up, fills this little bowl, back around, out this side right here. This side goes straight to your needle right there, and your needle has a little rubber piece on the end of it, and this spring is kind of set to a certain pressure to blow off. I'll demonstrate that here in just a second. So once this opens up, this whole basin fills up, and this allows that diaphragm to flex in and out and allow that fuel to be metered through here in the high speed and into the low speed right through there where we looked at the other day on the Poland carburetor. So those dump into the venturi and get sucked down into the engine, and that's essentially the quick and dirty on how the carburetor process works. Now what we're going to do here on this one is I'm going to show you how the needle works. So that needle has a rubber tip on the end of it. That rubber tip seats in the little hole up underneath that needle, and creates a suction is what it does. Alright, so now what you can do is check your pop-off. They call it pop-off pressure. So it's the pressure at which the suction on this needle blows. See my needle moving? So it's building pressure, so that, and it's slowly leaking down because I haven't got enough Alright, so there we go. Alright, so you see it building, and it's slowly going to leak down the more pressure that's on it. But this is your pop off. It should pop off around 10 to 15 psi. See, there you go. I just blew WD-40 all over me. So I forget what it popped off at, but it popped off around 12, I think. So that's about normal. So you know, and what controls that is your spring, right? Your spring controls that. So if you ever have issues with pop off, it's your meter and spring that controls that. So in some situations where your pop off pressure may be too much, you can go trim that spring to reduce that pop off, to allow the saw to not stumble on acceleration, because sometimes if your pop off's too much, the saw will stumble and want to choke down and fall on its face until it finally pops off and starts pulling fuel and takes off. I don't know who that is. Maybe they'll leave a voicemail. Alright, so that's essentially how a carburetor works. That's the quick and dirty. And I know we went over it before, but I'm going to go over it again. Your diaphragm on the pump side of the carburetor goes down. Your gasket goes up. So it should look like that. You can see all the little grooves from this plate that partition all the holes in that gasket off. And if you're cleaning, if you have gasket on this and you're cleaning it, be careful not to use anything too abrasive that you start grinding down these ridges, because that will really screw up. I mean, it'll ruin the carburetor. Well, it won't ruin the carburetor, it'll ruin this plate. It won't run right. So we're going to put that back on there. Just like that. Now, the other side, if you remember, I said the other side is the metering side. So on the metering side, your gasket needs to go down first, because that diaphragm needs room to move up and down in unison with this lever here. So gasket down, diaphragm on the top. And this right here is still usable. It's getting kind of stiff. You can kind of hear it crinkling, but it's not horrible. You always got to make sure when it's got that little nipple on it that you hook it in the fork of that lever. So we're going to put this back together, and then I'm going to show you another carburetor you'll probably run into in your adventures. These cube carburetors, these are Tillotson Hs carburetors, and the Walbro carburetors function pretty much the same way, but their circuits, how they move fuel across the carburetor, is a lot different, especially on the newer ones. And even on some of the newer ones, they have internals that can actually mess up inside, cast inside the carburetor, that can cause issues. These, for the most part, can be rebuilt quite a lot before they start failing. Not so much with the newer ones. And some of you may have noticed, some of you might not have, but this top plate also has a hole cut in it for equalization as well, for that diaphragm. Some people mistakenly pull this cover off and they see a bunch of debris under it and they're like, well, that's the problem. No, not necessarily. You're going to get debris up underneath that. Now, if you have debris up underneath that metering diaphragm, then you have issues. And on the pump side of that metering needle, there's always a screen there. You always want to make sure that screen is clean, or else you could be pulling in foreign debris and clogging it up. So I like to refer to, this is a Tillotson HL, and in the 60s this was the carb. I mean, this is all anybody was really using. There were a few that other people were using. Mac was using, you know, their carbs every now and then, but their carbs weren't as good as these Tillotson HLs, so they eventually just started using Tillotson for all their stuff from the 60s. 60s, yeah. 70s they went to Walbro SDCs. Every now and then you'll see a Mac with a Tillotson on it, but see, Mac, they kind of had a thing, a relationship with Walbro, because Walbro helped, I think Walbro helped them develop their first pump carburetor, because Mac was the first one to come out with a pump carburetor like this. Tillotson just made it better. So I call these a pancake. And those are the 3 pieces of the pancake. Alright. So up underneath this screw can be a pain to get out, so I'm not going to take it out. So up underneath this, there's a screen and a cork gasket that keeps this sealed, keeps it from leaking. So it intakes and dribbles down into this basin here, and what, if you really think about it, if your fuel is coming out of this side as opposed to this side, so our fuel is coming out on this, on the top of this block, the top of this cube, right? So the gasket is face down, flush up against the cube. Not the gasket, the diaphragm is flush onto the cube, so that way the flaps cover the holes that the fuel and stuff is coming out of, right? And then the gasket's on top of that, and then your voids that the fuel moves through is in this cap. So very much opposite here. This is where your fuel is coming from, so your gasket has to be flush with the top, the pancake. So essentially, your gasket is reverse, so it's flush to the top, or not your gasket, I'm sorry, your diaphragm. Your diaphragm is flush with the top of the pancake. Then your gasket is on the bottom, on the, which is the top of the second layer. Then it's the same as this side on the bottom. Needs room to flex, right? So your gasket's on the bottom and your diaphragm's on the top. So that particular part of the carburetor is the same. The only side that's different, well, come on. Oh wait, there we go. The only side that's different is the top part. But essentially, the fuel makes its way over here to this round part. Your needle is down in here, and the fuel goes down here and then comes up right there where the needle is, and it does the same thing. Pops off, fills up. There's your impulse. Here's your high speed and low speed screws. And I think this one, no, this one doesn't have a governor. Some of these do have a governor. It would be, I think, right there. Yeah, it would be in there. But this one doesn't have a governor. So to recap real quick, on the pancakes, your diaphragm is on top, gasket on the bottom. On the bottom of the pancake, same as a block, gasket on the bottom, diaphragm on the top. Pretty simple stuff when it's broke down for you. And I always put these in like a tire. You go screw them all the way in, and I just go diagonal. And then once I get the last one down, I go ahead and crank it and then go in reverse. I've rebuilt many of these carburetors. Matter of fact, that C5 I have gave me all kinds of fits when I first started working on carburetors, and I'll tell you exactly what was wrong with it. You see this little pink gasket up underneath that screw? You need that. If you don't have that, fuel will come out of there and the saw won't run. So that's what happened to me. I think I covered everything that I wanted to cover. I can't think of anything right off the top of my head that I missed, that I haven't talked about in the other two videos. This was mostly just kind of a quick and dirty, so you know how it got from your fuel tank to your engine, and how with the impulse. So it gives you an idea where to look when diagnosing carburetors, what to look for, or what parts of the carburetor to look at. So, all right, I hope this helps somebody at least. And if y'all think of anything else that you may want me to go over that I know, feel free to let me know, and I'll make a video. So y'all have a good one. Hope everyone's doing well. And hello to all the new people who've come in the past couple weeks. We appreciate, or all of us as a community, appreciate everybody. And I imagine most of y'all are coming from other channels and scattered throughout this community. So I enjoy talking with y'all and interacting with y'all. I answer everybody's questions. Any comments y'all leave, I try my very best to answer. Especially questions. If you ask me questions, I will answer those. And my email's there if anyone wants to contact me personally. So that's it for tonight. I got some stuff coming up in the near future, so stay tuned for that. Y'all have a good one. We'll see you next time.